me. My neighbor filled my water tank with concrete, said it clashed with her vision board. Turns out her vision includes running a fake HOA, scamming 12 families, and trying to steal my land for a yoga spa. What she didn't know. That tank wasn't just mine, and I wasn't just some guy planting daisies. She had no idea what her little stunt would set in motion. Me. Ever had a neighbor treat your property like her personal Sims game? Tell me in the comments, especially if the fallout lasted longer than they expected. When I left Denver's corporate landscaping circus for rural Nebraska, I thought I was trading HO horror stories for native wildflowers and actual peace. 10 acres, a 1960s farmhouse, me, and one big beautiful tank I planned to turn into a rainwater system. But peace in Bucket Valley has a name, me, and that name is Pam Wallace, a woman so allergic to other people's happiness, she once filed a noise complaint against wind. First week in, I'm mapping out my butterfly sanctuary, and here comes Pam. Me marching up my driveway like she's about to foreclose on my soul. Are you the new owner? She asked, holding a binder thicker than my mortgage. Me. That tank is an environmental violation and aesthetic disaster. I blinked. She had paperwork with phrases like visual contamination and unlicensed aqua containment. No joke. Me. One section was titled The Tyranny of Unregulated Concrete. I told her I planned to collect rainwater for ecological planting, and she recoiled like I'd threatened her begonias. Mr. Dillard. Me. That tank is a danger to this community. According to Pam, water was only safe if it came in bottles with designer labels. So I did the only rational thing. I googled her OA. No registry, no county records. Me. Just Pam's inkjet and a clip art logo with a suspiciously low resolution eagle. I asked my neighbor Hal about her, and he just sighed. Pam used to work in zoning. Me. Now she runs a government of one with a fake seal and a mean streak. Most folks let her rant so she doesn't ruin their week. I tried to laugh, but Hal wasn't kidding. Me. She'll call the county if your grass sneezes sideways. What I didn't know was that Pam had already decided my property wasn't mine. Me. She'd tried to buy it before I did, and now that dream was drying up faster than her credibility. She wasn't just annoyed about the tank, she was planning to weaponize it. If you've ever been bossed around by someone with fake power and real nerve, hit that like button. Pam once cited a lawn gnome for inciting disorder. Now she's calling my mulch suspicious. That's the kind of woman we're dealing with, someone who thinks compost is a gateway crime. Me. My mailbox started filling with what I can only describe as passive-aggressive valentines from a wannabe dictator in orthopedic wedges. Each envelope came with letterhead so official, looking it practically smelled like toner and ego. First violation. Me. My compost pile was labeled a biohazard risk due to unmonitored organic material. Next came a citation for my solar bird bath. Me. Which allegedly disrupted aesthetic consistency with traditional hydrological fixtures. My native milkweed patch got flagged as unlawful indigenous flora propagation. I half expected her to ban clouds for violating HA sky pellet compliance. The best part, each notice came with a stern deadline and the promise of enforcement escalation, like she was deploying tanks, not typos. So I started digging, not in the soil, but online. Me. No trace of Pam's HOA. No business license, no government affiliation, not even a badly made Facebook group with Comic Sans memes. Just a woman with a printer, a dream, and apparently, a warehouse of clipboards. Me. I brought my findings to Hal, who leaned back in his squeaky porch chair like he was settling in for a long story. Pam used to work zoning in the next county over. Knew just enough to sound scary. Me. Got fired for, get this, excessive enthusiasm for compliance. Now she plays show dress up and hands out fines like coupons. Then came the whopper. Me. A registered envelope demanding a $12,000 inspection of my concrete tank. Me. Citing serious structural instability and potential aqua hostile materials. She included a list of preferred experts, which I later found all belonged to one LC registered to, you guessed it, her brother, Travis, certified by nobody, Wallace. That tank had survived decades, 2 hailstorms, and a stray tractor, but now it was suddenly a threat to national security. At that point I wasn't just annoyed. Me. I was curious. Why so much attention to this one tank? Why the rush? Why the folder with construction permit codes that didn't even apply to my zip code? Pam was up to something. Me. And I had a gut feeling it wasn't about water or weeds. It was about control. And maybe something deeper buried. If your neighbors ever handed you fake fines with real threats, tap that like. Me. They say water is life. Pam thinks it's a liability unless you bottle it, tax it, or paint it beige. She looked at my concrete tank like it was a medieval plague cauldron instead of what it actually was. The most reliable thing on my land, second only to Hal's side eye. I figured if she was this obsessed, there had to be something about that tank she didn't want me to understand. So I grabbed a wrench, a flashlight, and an attitude and went digging. Turns out that oogly eyesore wasn't just a glorified bird bath. The tank was part of an old water system buried beneath the hill, connected to what looked like a retired network of pipes leading straight to neighboring homes. And by retired, I mean currently doing the job the county forgot. I traced one pipe past my fence and into the brush, where it forked off like gossip at a church potluck. I knew I'd just uncovered more than plumbing. I'd found the real reason Pam wanted that tank gone. Hal confirmed it later that evening with his usual calm doom. Back in '66 we had a drought so bad people were drinking out of bathtubs. The old landowner built that tank with his bare hands and shared water through those pipes. You inherited a legacy, son, not just a rain catcher. I blinked. I hadn't bought a water system. I bought the neighborhood's last lifeline and apparently hadn't been CC'd on the memo. Meanwhile, Pam had known all along and was working overtime to keep me clueless. That's when her final notice landed like a dead fish on my porch. In all caps, immediate action required. Community safety violation. If I didn't demolish the tank in 72 hours, the association would remediate the hazard on my behalf. That was the moment it clicked. Pam wasn't just harassing me, she was waiting for me to slip, so she could legally pounce, fill it, fence it, or flip it into a spa jacuzzi for her retirement scheme. I'd seen HOA madness before, but this woman made bureaucracy a blood sport. Some folks want control so badly. They'll burn the well if they can't own the bucket. I didn't just need to protect a tank. I needed to protect the people depending on it, most of whom had no idea Pam was planning to bury their water supply in a fit of beige rage. Before Pam turns that tank into a cement coffin, hit like and follow. What she does next breaks more than the law, it cracks open her entire scam. The sound of a concrete truck at dawn is only comforting if you're building a pool, not being ambushed by HOA cosplay in a reflective vest. I woke up to the sweet rumble of industrial sabotage and the unmistakable hiss of wet cement being poured into my legacy. By the time I got outside, half my tank had vanished under a river of gray. Like my property was getting a mafia burial. And there stood Pam, hard hat, clipper, and a neon vest that screamed, mall security energy, or Mr. Caldwell, I'm exercising emergency powers under the Valley Crest Civic League, she announced as if she was FEMA, NASA, and Judge Judy rolled into one. When I asked for ID, she handed me a badge she clearly printed at Kinko's and laminated with optimism. The crew, hired contractors, just following the mysterious work order from the association president. One of them looked at me with an apologetic shrug and said, "She told us the tank was contaminated and city flagged." The tank, by the way, hadn't been city flagged since ever. I called the sheriff, because apparently I still believe in something called justice. Deputy Martinez arrived 10 minutes later looking like he'd rather be anywhere else, preferably a donut shop or active volcano. After hearing both sides, he sighed and said, "Sounds like a civil dispute." Pam pounced. "We're protecting the public from rogue water storage." I stared at him, stunned. She's literally burying a community water supply. But since she had documentation, and I had mud on my boots, he told us to settle it legally and left with the grace of a man dodging a lawsuit. Then Pam handed me an envelope like it was a Christmas card and not a financial gut punch. Inside, a 6,400 invoice for community emergency intervention. Line items included hazardous terrain suppression, unauthorized aquifer stabilization, and my personal favorite, hostile groundwater defiance. I blinked at the paper, then at her. "You can't be serious." She smiled like a rattlesnake in pearls. "Mr. Caldwell, this community cannot afford your recklessness." That's when I realized, this wasn't just about property. This was about power. Sometimes the most dangerous thing on your property isn't what's buried, it's who walks around with a clipboard. Pam didn't just block a pipe, she choked off trust, community, and a literal lifeline. And she did it with Xeroxed authority and a truck full of wet revenge. Like this story, if you've ever paid for damage you didn't cause, nothing says "foops" like realizing you've inherited a water utility and forgot to install a suggestion box. Turns out, those random 50 checks Curtis had been depositing weren't a friendly rebate for being eco-conscious. They were payments from 12 households drawing water from his concrete tank. 12, as in, a dozen homes, families, gardens, goats, and great aunts, all quietly relying on what Curtis thought was a big ol' rain barrel. He wasn't just growing wildflowers, he was the unintentional mayor of a liquid democracy. Hal broke the news gently, like a farmer trying to explain crop rotation to a golden retriever. "That tank's been feeding this valley since '65, he said. "Tom Miller built it during the drought. Folks ran piping and paid him direct. Then his kids kept it going." Curtis blinked, like someone just told him his backyard was the Hoover Dam. And Pam knew she paid into it. Drank from it, then filled it with concrete like she was deleting a spreadsheet. By Saturday, faucets in the valley started coughing like old smokers. One house ran out of water mid-shower. Another had to give their chickens bottled Aquafina. The fear spread faster than fertilizer in spring, and Pam was ready. She jumped in front of the panic with a tail taller than her safety hat. Curtis Caldwell has endangered this community with reckless aquifer mismanagement, she declared. Me printing flyers like a scandalous PTA mom in a moral panic. The word contaminated showed up more than once. So did the phrase unauthorized irrigation terrorism. Curtis tried to explain me, but truth had a flat tire and Pam was driving a tank. People stopped waving. One woman at the diner asked if she'd catch something from her coffee. Another suggested Curtis was part of a deep well conspiracy. It didn't matter that he had no idea what the tank even was until 5 days ago. Pam's fake HOA might have had no legal power. Me, but her gossipy airstrikes were landing hard. She was building a story, one scare at a time, and the valley was thirsty for someone to blame. Me. Real power doesn't need a badge, it just needs a story people believe. The worst part, Pam wasn't just filling people's heads, she was draining their trust drop by drop. And Curtis? He was about to give them something they couldn't unsee. If you've ever been blamed for something ridiculous, smash that like button. Pam's empire of lies is cracking. Next comes the video, a town meeting, me, and the flood she didn't plan for. Pam once hosted a mandatory potluck. Bring a dish or get a citation. Guess who's now the entree? The folding chairs were set, the crockpots were bubbling, me, and every neighbor who ever paid her HOA decorative mulch fee showed up to see what Curtis and Hal had to say. Some came curious, some came furious. One guy came because he heard there'd be cookies, me, but they all left with their mouths open for very different reasons. Curtis kicked things off like a man introducing the opening act of a courtroom drama. No gavel, just a projector, a timeline, me, and a voice so steady you could balance a garden gnome on it. First came the receipts, every fake rule Pam had mailed like ransom notes. Then came the video, grainy but clear, me with Pam in her fake vest and fake authority giving real instructions to destroy the valley's only water source. The room went from restless to razor sharp. Then Curtis dropped the hammer. Scanned blueprints of Pam's proposed wellness and retreat spa, with exclusive spring-fed therapy pools, listed as an amenity. Pam stood up, tried to snatch the spotlight like it was her karaoke night. This is a coordinated smear campaign, she bellowed, as if the truth had hacked her HOA newsletter. But Hal wasn't having it. Pam, may you billed me for violating fence feng shui. Sit down, and she did, hard. Because someone had just shouted from the back, I drank chlorine because of you. Neighbors turned like tides. Margaret, whose roses wilted from lack of water, me, stood up and called Pam a backyard dictator. A teen held up his phone and read aloud one of Pam's texts demanding they remove youth-related noise pollution. Even Bob, the guy who never says anything unless it involves gas prices, spoke up. What trusted you, Pam? You turned us into a bunch of pitchfork-waving fools and I missed Jeopardy. For this, Curtis didn't gloat. He just held up one final item, me. The official confirmation that Pam's so-called HOA wasn't registered with any government entity. Everything she did was a house of lies built on stolen stationery, he said, cool as shade on a summer porch, me. And that's when Pam realized as she'd lost the room. Justice doesn't always wear a robe. Sometimes it carries a USB stick and a laser pointer. But Pam hadn't reached her final form yet. Follow before Pam declares herself mayor of mailboxes. Pam always said she worked closely with local officials. Turns out, me printing your own name tag and winking at the county clerk doesn't make you certified. 2 days after the town hall roast, Curtis's inbox lit up like a 4th of July barbecue fire, except instead of hot dogs, it was 3 complaints from 3 totally fake agencies, all signed by the same woman who once fined a neighbor for whom proper tomato enthusiasm. Spoiler alert, her printer's ink was still wet. Me. Enter Inspector Rachel N.G., an actual county official with a badge that didn't come from Etsy. She showed up with a clipboard so real even Pam's nose twitched. Me. I've received multiple reports about your property. Rachel said, sighed, eyeing the stack of crayon-grade documents Pam submitted. Rachel ran them through a scanner. 2 had typos in the legal codes. Me. 1 cited a statute from Canada, and 1 literally had a watermark from Template Haven. Calm, Curtis just leaned on his fence, sipping iced tea like it was popcorn. Pam, me, not one to let reality ruin a good performance, showed up wearing what looked suspiciously like a judge's robe from Party City and declared, why I am acting in accordance with Valley Crest regulatory expectations. Rachel blinked. That's not a thing, she replied, me flipping to the page labeled Emergency Cement Deployment Protocols. Curtis chimed in. She also tried to fine me for growing chamomile without a herb integration permit. Rachel gave the kind of sigh you give after realizing you'll need backup. Legal backup. Rachel called in the sheriff, me. And that's when things got operatic. Pam demanded the sheriff arrest Curtis for water negligence with intent to disrupt civic harmony. The sheriff, me, a patient man who'd seen it all, including a guy trying to register his goat as an emotional support vehicle, just said, "Mom, this ain't Monopoly." He took statements. Me collected every forged HOA letterhead, including one printed on the back of a Chili's coupon. Then, he walked Pam to his cruiser like she'd just tried to rob a vending machine with a kazoo. The real twist, me. Rachel's team uncovered more than just fake fines. Pam had kept meticulous minutes for board meetings that never happened. She'd voted on budgets with her cat listed as treasurer, and her wellness retreat business plan included a marketing section titled, "How to Evict Curtis Without Legal Trouble." The sheriff called it the most polite paper trail of organized fraud he'd ever seen. Me, don't fake power unless you're okay with printing your lies in your sentencing documents. And even as the cuffs clicked, Pam had one last HOA card left to play. Tap that follow like Pam taps her authority stamp. Pam now lives in Phoenix, where the haze are real, the bylaws are bulletproof, and clipboards come with liability insurance. Me. She tried the same antics in a gated community, got sued in under 12 hours, and now scrubs fire hydrants for court, ordered community service like a disgraced firefighter on timeout. Me. I heard she tried to fine a palm tree for leaning suspiciously toward the sun. The judge sentenced her to 6 months of reflective landscaping. Me, not jail, just yard work with a guilty conscience and a lot of citrus allergies. Back in our valley, we were busy turning concrete ruins into a revival. After Pam's plea a deal, restitution, public apology, me, and a one-way U-Haul out of Nebraska, Curtis gathered every family once connected to that old tank. They didn't just rebuild it. They redesigned the entire system larger and smarter, me. With valves that didn't squeak like secrets and a nameplate that read, "Water belongs to the people." The town created an actual cooperative, me, with bylaws so clear even Pam's ghost couldn't misinterpret them. But the sweetest revenge wasn't bureaucratic, it was botanical. Pam's former home, yes, me, the porch throne of tyranny, was purchased at auction by a conservation nonprofit. The board, mostly local elders tired of HOA cosplay, transformed the entire lot into a native plant education center. Wildflowers replaced the paranoia. Kids learned about prairie roots where Pam once ranted about garden gnomes being surveillance devices. And the best part, they named the center after Curtis. Full title, me. The Curtis Lyle Native Heritage Garden and Community Water Learning Lab. Say that 5 times fast and it still won't erase Pam's permanent sunburn from karma. One afternoon as I walked past the new center, me, a little girl pointed at a mural of the original tank and asked her mom, "Is that the water hero?" Her mom nodded and said, "Yup." He stood up to the clipboard queen and saved the whole valley. And right there in that moment, I knew the plants weren't the only thing that had taken root. The truth had too. And unlike Pam's paperwork, it wasn't going anywhere. Authority built on fear collapses the second people realize it's made of glitter glue and gaslighting. But here's the deeper truth. This wasn't just about a water tank. It was about standing your ground when someone tries to bury you, literally, with rules they made up on a Tuesday. It was about exposing fake power, planting real trust, me, and reminding folks that community isn't built on compliance, it's built on care. We laughed, sure, but we also learned something powerful. You don't need a badge to do what's right. You don't need paperwork to be brave. And if someone tries to silence you with concrete, you turn it into a foundation. So if this story made you laugh, made you think, or just made you want to rip up an HOA flyer, hit that like button. Drop a comment below. Tell us about your own HOA horror stories or how you fought back with wit and willpower. And make sure you subscribe, because we've got more stories where everyday folks take on petty tyrants, overreach, and red tape, and win with style. The next one's a doozy. Think jazz band revenge, a rogue parrot, me, and a pastor who moonlights as a city inspector. Trust me, you don't want to miss it.